Look, man, let's keep it 100. You see my bank account, you see these bills. Whoever gets elected ain't doing nothing about none of that.
You say that like I got money. Look, we up in this sports bar. You saw what I just ordered. Listen, I feel what you're saying. But what about your kids?
What about them?
Always talking about what's happening at your daughter's school.
I don't play by my baby girl, you know that.
There are people running for school board who can do something about it. So stop all that complaining and vote for folks who will do right by your baby girl. And remember when those cops had your son jammed up on some nonsense?
Yeah, that had me shook. But that judge down there, you know, at the courthouse worked it out.
My dude, how you think the judge got up there? She got voted in by people like us. Well, people like me, because you don't vote.
I keep seeing all these ads about the presidential election. I don't even really think about school board races or voting for judges, the races that hit closer to home.
Exactly. So you're voting, right?
All right, I get it. Yeah, I'm voting.
All that complaining. Sound like my wife.
Why you over here talking about me again?
My fault, baby. In order for government to be of the people, by the people, and for the people, the politics has to get closer to the people. I'm John McCann, and this is the Closer to the People podcast, a production of North Carolina Black Alliance. And if you still need something to give you a reason to even think about considering whether you're going to vote, listen to me. There's no shame in that. But I believe I have something here that'll give you something to think about. It's a conversation with a couple of journalists I met during the National Association of Black Journalists Convention in Chicago back in August. They bring it home. Literally. Cherri Gregg is a host covering the courts for WHYY in Philadelphia. Ms. Gregg, put in perspective voters' power and importance to shape the local judicial system.
Well, in Pennsylvania, our judges are elected. And so many of these judges, once they get elected, 10 years in office. And most people do not pay attention to the judicial elections. And many of them are affiliated with a specific party, even though they're supposed to be nonpartisan. And most folks have never heard of their names. They don't evaluate them, and they just vote down the line according to the party without any evaluation at all. And so a lot of times when you go before a judge for the very first time, it's because you've been it's the worst day because you have a family member who may have been killed or injured, or you have a family member who may have been caught up in the criminal justice system, or you suffered major injury or damage. And so you need to know who these judges are before they get on the bench. And many times once they're on the bench, even though they're up for election every 10 years, they've been on the bench for decades. In Philadelphia, we had the issue with a judge who covered the Meek Mill case, who dealt with the Meek Mill case. And Judge Brinkley, come to find out, she had all sorts of issues. And once voters were able to discern that and see that, and Meek Mill and his supporters highlighted those issues, she did not win for her reelection. But that was voters taking control. But how many times did she get reelected before they were able to figure that out? You're more likely to come in contact with a judge than you are with VP Harris or former President Donald Trump. And these judges have direct impact over your life. And I'm telling you, like, the one time you have to show up, you want to make sure that the person on the other side of that bench is someone who shares maybe your own values.
Ava-joye Burnett covers the Supreme Court for Scripps News. That's a national outlet based in Atlanta. The Supreme Court has been active. Help my folks understand the importance of just being educated about what's going on as it relates to the courts.
Well, for me personally, I am a legal affairs correspondent. I cover a lot of legal cases. And I realize when I tell the stories, when I put them on social media, a lot of folks are saying, I didn't know that's how that sort of thing plays out. People don't always understand the process. They may hear the beginning of a legal story and then the end, but they don't know everything that happens in the middle. So when I put stuff out on social media, it's my intention to make it very simple, very clear, so that our viewers understand every step of the way. Because it's really important to have an informed public. And sometimes people aren't watching traditional news anymore, so you got to meet people where they are. If they're on social media, meet them there, break it down for them. With the law, the terms are sometimes so complex and so complicated. There are a lot of Latin terms. And when when I am reading these court documents, I may not understand everything. If I don't understand it, I know that there are other people who may not understand it as well. So I always break it down in layman's terms so that everyone understands. If we understand what is being said, what is going on in the court system, we're just better informed, better prepared, better able to ask questions that benefit our families. Just being more informed, that's better overall.
Ava-joye, you're covering the Supreme Court. That's way up here. I'm talking about my folks on a local level. How does that education need to be ascertained by them?
Well, before cases make it to the U.S. Supreme Court, they start in local jurisdictions. They start in states. Abortion cases start in Idaho. Voting rights cases start in South Carolina. There was a really big case involving voting rights that came out this term. It was one of the first cases that came out, and it made it up to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it has to do with voting districts in states like yours. So that's why it's important. It may go all the way up to Washington, D.C., but before it gets there, it has to do with water issues in Ohio, or what can people do in their schools? What books are people allowed to have in schools? Gun rights in Texas, anywhere across the country. That's where the issues start, and then they make it up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's why it's important for people to be informed about what happens on their local level, because one day it's in your state, the next day it's in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Supreme Court.
So you'll pardon my cliche when I say that all politics really are local.
Yeah, and all of the laws are local, and when they're challenged, they make it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Ava-joye, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, the point here is you have a right to vote. And you have a right to not vote and still have something to say about what goes on politically. But there is power in your vote, and I just want you to see where you fit in with that power and use it. This has been the Closer to the People podcast, a production of North Carolina Black Alliance. Reach out and touch me at john@ncblackalliance.org and stay informed at ncblackalliance.org. Until next time, keep in mind, a government of, by, and for the people has to get closer to the people. Think about this. You're standing in line to vote. It's a long line. You've been waiting a long time. You finally get to the table to get your ballot, only to be told, "I'm sorry, but you're not registered to vote." From the start of 2023 through August 2024, county boards of elections in North Carolina removed some 747,000 ineligible registration records from the state's voter rolls. Were you one of them? Better check. Find out at safevoternc.org. In-person early voting starts October 17th and ends 3 p.m. November 2nd. There is same-day voter registration during in-person early voting. The deadline to request an absentee ballot is 5 p.m. October 29th. Election day is November 5th. Details about all of that are at safevoternc.org. Voting not only is our right, it's also our power. We're counting on you to encourage 3 friends and family members to vote before November 5th. Text them, call them, DM them, tag them, because more black voters means more black power. And no one has more power than us to protect our community. So encourage 3 friends and family members to vote today. Voting is exponential. Those who represent us are determined by those who show up, especially when we show up in numbers.